the famous Scole Experiment. An experiment that allegedly actually confirms that there is an afterlife and people can communicate with that afterlife. What is the value of seances? It's a fair question. There have been many experiments done in regard to seances, done by the Society for Psychical Research, supposedly confirms that seances and mediums, they actually work. Ghostly lights floating around the room, images appearing on film inside secure containers, people being touched by unseen hands, levitating tables, and disembodied voices. Due to the large number of individuals involved, including investigators and various well-informed and relatively impartial sitters, it seems to be legit. So this test, the Scole Experiment, is very often called evidence that spirits survive in the afterlife, and they come back intact with their living memories, that the soul goes on and the personality survives. The experiment involved 6 mediums and 15 investigators, the investigators being from the Society of Psychical Research. The report on the experiment, known as the Scole Report, is several hundred pages long and contains various written notes and full accounts of the people involved. The detailed report goes through the history of how the experiments came together, details of each of the many seances, and presents analysis and criticism from a number of investigators who observed the actual tests themselves. According to skeptics, the Scole Experiment was tainted by a profound investigative failing. Scientific tests require proper controls. The lack of ability to manipulate the results ensure the objectivity of the results, as opposed to a influenced and distorted view which would be created where controls are not properly in place. We cannot be sure that the phenomena involved was indeed genuine. Specific notes made by the investigators point out that the medium's hands never moved, or seemed to never move. If the seance was in place, the wristband moved from the wrist, and the investigator did not know, or the investigators did not know, who's to say that a free hand was not at work? We know from the work of magicians that deception can be quite easy. When people are sitting in one place observing how things unfold, they cannot see what's going on behind the scenes. They don't see the deception because professionals are at work, and so the deception is hidden. The methods used are mysterious, and so you don't know what you're looking for. Another phenomena was the spontaneous appearance of images on film. During the seance, factory-sealed film cartridges were placed inside a padlocked box. The spirits were then asked to leave an image upon the film. The locked box was taken, the film developed, in the strict, constant supervision of investigators. This feat was repeated many times. However, one of the investigators, Alan Gould, wrote critically of how he discovered the box, which is supposedly locked, could be opened quickly, in the dark, which allowed easy substitution of films. It is possible that there could have been some deception going on here, not least because the people who supplied the box were in fact the mediums, so they would know if it's easy enough to open, even if it seems to be locked tight. The authors of the Scole Report acknowledge this fact, and yet they maintain the opinion that these images are perhaps evidence of paranormal phenomena. Another example from the experiment is the venue in which a sitting took place. It was a room in a basement of a house where two of the mediums lived, Robin and Sandra Foy. Rather than controlling the environment, the investigators ceded total control over the room and conditions to the mediums. So basically this experiment didn't even establish the most basic controls. Despite this, there is no actual evidence of trickery. It would have been so easy for the people actually conducting this test to actually do it properly, to provide their own room, to ensure that controls are satisfactory, to ensure that if a box is used for spirits to influence film, it can't be easily opened in the dark, to ensure if there are luminous wristbands, that there's something provided by the team itself and cannot be tampered with. A few seances were held at other locations, and the results from those other locations is described as variable in the Scole report. It's interesting to note that the mediums insisted on the seances being conducted in the dark, in pitch blackness, with no light sources. They wouldn't even allow night vision cameras to be used. The medium's explanation was that they felt such equipment would distract the investigators. However, audio recordings were permitted, but since the phenomena was largely visual, audio tapes are basically of very little use. The nearest thing to a follow-up was conducted by the well-known psychologist and author Richard Wiseman. He provided secure envelopes for the film rolls to the experimenters, and the film within these envelopes failed to be exposed. It's interesting to note that with a very few controls, the phenomena does not take place. So far from being a genuine test, it is in fact pseudoscience, badly conducted and misrepresenting the facts.